Three Pearls. Love Stories from French Polynesia. Book 1. Copyright 2025, Paris Paper Doll Party. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. Yellow curtains fluttered in the window as a gust of wind swept in through the opening. It settled into the corner of the room. It had been a while since permission to observe was granted. Humans weren't the only ones who got excited when change was coming. "Marlin, what are you barking at? Come here," 10-year-old Laurent begged. He scanned the corner, searching for the source of the commotion, but there was nothing there. He tugged at the dog's collar, trying not to disrupt the tea party in his sister's room. The dog would not relent. "At least stop barking," Laurent instructed. Marlin, a sharp Belgian Malinois, understood and complied by resorting to moaning instead. Laurent's little sister Sophie sat at a table in the middle of her room. "Laurent, I'm pouring you a cup. Please sit down," she said. At 8 years old, Sophie acted like a matronly figure, pretending to be the mistress of her own home. A white cat named Coco sat at the table, looking every bit the picture of elegance, with her pink bow and blue eyes, much like the refined upper-class types of Paris, to which she belonged. Both pets belonged to their grandparents, and it was in this home that Sophie and Laurent had just moved after losing their father. With neither child having made new friends at school, passing the time together was necessary, especially with a pile of macaroons present. "Oh, this came today!" Sophie exclaimed as she jumped from her chair to retrieve something from the dresser. Sophie waved an envelope in the air. "Do you see this? It's a letter. It came from French Polynesia," she said. "I have a pen pal." "What's that?" Laurent asked. "It's a person I've never met, and we write letters to each other. This girl is my age, and she lives in Tahiti. She speaks French." Laurent didn't quite understand why anyone would want to write a letter to a stranger, so he simply downed his peppermint tea. Sophie continued, "Feel how thick this envelope is. Surely there are photos inside." Laurent's interest was piqued. As Sophie gently tore the seal open, Coco's white paw reached over to help with the ripping. Marlin came over, alerted by the sound of tearing paper. He usually associated that noise with a meaty treat, but this time he was disappointed. Sophie's eyes widened when 4 photos slid out. Laurent reached for one. "Whoa," he said as he looked at the image. It showed a beautiful ocean ringed by towering mountains, the most stunning place he had ever seen. "Is this Tahiti?" Sophie leaned over to see. Laurent set his mind to it. "I am going to swim in that water." The children had grown up in the crowded streets of Paris, where buildings filled the skyline and the streets were packed, especially in summer when tourists poured in. "What a magical island," Sophie whispered. "If you're going, I'm going." The next photo showed a girl with an impish grin and long black hair. "If I met her in real life, I bet we'd be best friends," Sophie dreamed. Flipping the photo over, she read the name on the back. Vairani, age 8. Sophie tried to pronounce it, but wasn't sure if she got it right. "My name means heavenly water," the girl had explained. The following photo showed Vairani with 2 siblings, an older sister and a younger brother. Laurent took a long look at the older girl who seemed to be his age. She had beautiful eyes that seemed to smile at him. Just then, their mother walked in. She reminded her children of a wilting flower. Their father had left her a widow at 27. "How are the macaroons?" she asked, ruffling Laurent's hair and leaning down to kiss Sophie on the forehead. She shooed the cat off the chair and gracefully sat down. The cat let out a sound of disdain at being treated so. Sophie poured her mother a cup of tea. Coco jumped onto the windowsill and began to lick her wounds. "My pen pal wrote to me," Sophie exclaimed, pushing the pretty ocean picture toward her mother. If anything would cheer her up, this picture would. The cup of tea was halfway to Renee's mouth when her eyes registered what she was looking at. She gasped and dropped the cup, spilling its contents all over the table. Both children started in surprise. A sob tore from Renee's chest, and her shaking hands covered her face. Sophie immediately became scared, and Laurent jumped back, going rigid, as he watched his mother. Sophie then burst into tears, and Laurent sprang into action. He stepped in to wrap his arms around his mother, and then pulled Sophie into the embrace. Chapter 2. Wednesday, April 21st, 1982. Milan, Italy. Philippe Allery was a confident young man. The world was his oyster. Thrill Fashion magazine had hired him as their photographer for a fashion spread. He had a week to prepare and pack for Italy. The May 1982 issue promised to be a standout addition to his portfolio. Who wouldn't admire his enviable position? He was well compensated to work alongside some of the most stunning models in the world. The magazine took care of all the arrangements, covering his airfare, hotel, and gourmet dining experiences. What an extraordinary life! After a long journey, he realized he was quite hungry. About 45 minutes later, he found himself seated in a charming restaurant. A waiter soon placed a steaming plate of fettuccine alfredo before him. Its delightful aroma filled the air. A second waiter poured a crisp glass of Chardonnay, and Philippe, feeling hungrier than he had anticipated, dove into the dish with enthusiasm, momentarily forgetting his surroundings. Suddenly, laughter resonated from a nearby table. It pulled him out of his focused dinner. He looked up and saw a beautiful woman sitting at her table alone. She was trying to stifle her laughter, but, upon their eye contact, turned away with a small blush. Her body began to shake as she tried to suppress her giggles. Philippe, flustered and slightly embarrassed, snapped his napkin in response, only to discover a good amount of Alfredo sauce on his cheeks. The woman rose swiftly, perhaps intending to visit the ladies' room, but ended up exiting the restaurant completely, a hint of laughter floating in the air as she left. Her name was Renee Moreau, and once outside in the cool night, she leaned back and laughed freely, letting the sound ring out into the starry sky. She sighed with satisfaction. She hopped into a taxi, her imagine swirling with a charming rogue covered in pasta. No need to worry about crossing paths again. Milan was a vast city after all. The following morning, the sun rose brightly, filling Philippe with anticipation for the photo shoot ahead. He spent the preceding hours meticulously checking and cleaning his camera and lenses. Upon arriving on site, he carefully arranged his equipment on a long table set up just for him. The shoot director gathered the team, sharing a vision for the day, emphasizing the aesthetic for the magazine. Soon the models arrived. They looked half-starved, but Philippe's camera would put some flesh on them. A camera always added 10 pounds. Makeup and hair had done their work, with heavily rouged cheeks and eyeshadows on each girl. Among them was Renee, a model from Paris. She bore a striking resemblance to her mother, who had once graced the runways of Parisian fashion houses decades earlier. Renee's dark expressive eyes and pouty lips paired well with anything she wore. Her beauty was complemented by her warm personality and sharp intellect, qualities passed down from her parents. As the shoot began, Renee, along with 2 other models, were called in for the next round of photographs. She effortlessly slipped into her modeling routine, while Philippe busily clicked away with his camera. But as he zoomed in on her face, she did the same to him. That unmistakable recognition struck her, and without any control, a joyful smile broke through, followed by a hearty laugh. She recognized Philippe. Philippe's attention snapped upwards, his cheeks flushing as he recognized the woman from the restaurant. Renee immediately clamped her hands over her mouth, mortified by her outburst, feeling a pang of embarrassment for both of them. The crew paused, sensing the electric tension, prompting the director to call for a break. Setting down his camera, Philippe swiftly made his way into the nearby trees, needing a moment to collect himself. Renee, feeling a pull to make amends, hurried after him. This was her chance to apologize sincerely. After all, she couldn't shake off how charming he seemed, even in his embarrassment. "Please forgive me, I didn't mean to laugh," she implored as she approached him cautiously. Philippe huffed like a wounded bear and reluctantly turned around to face her. She was stunning, no doubt about it, but the memory of her laughter hung heavy in the air. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. How humiliating! He couldn't think of a thing to say, and if he started to say something, he'd yell words he'd regret. So he stood there staring at her. How did he not recognize her? She saw him unguarded at dinner, and he ate like such a Neanderthal. "I really am sorry. I didn't mean to laugh at you," Renee repeated, hoping to smooth over the moment. Finally, Philippe barked. "Oh, really? 2 times now you've laughed. I'm glad I could be your entertainment for the evening." In that moment, it all rushed back to her mind. The sight of him, animatedly enjoying his meal, the Alfredo sauce. Philippe let out a yell as his hands flew up in the air. "Arr!" Somehow, despite his anger, he suddenly found the humor in it. At first, a low rumbling chuckle came, which grew until both threw off all care and laughed. When Philippe and Renee were done laughing, they both heaved a sigh simultaneously. A weight of tension rolled off both of them. Philippe looked at her out of the corner of his eye. He offered his hand to her. "Philippe à la riz, forth adronis peri." A smile formed on Renee's face as she took his proffered hand and shook it. "Renee Moreau, Les Marais, Paris." He continued, "You are just a 20-minute drive from me. Good, we should have dinner, and I will remember where I am this time." He gave a slight bow. "That sounds wonderful," Renee said, and she was beaming. Chapter 3. Tuesday, March 23rd, 1993, Bora Bora, French Polynesia. Philippe's father encouraged him to pursue photography after noticing how much his son loved the camera they had gifted him. Despite his young age, Philippe's photos were impressive. Looking back at that critical advice, he shuddered at the thought that he almost went into optometry. While optometry might have been the safe choice, it would have made him miserable. He could have been stuck in a small room asking patients, which is clearer, slide A or slide B, for several hours. Now he sat on a small boat, changing his camera lens as the craft lazily rocked up and down. The water was a stunning turquoise blue, and he could clearly see the marine life below. Tahiti Travel magazine hired him for a photo spread to promote the islands. As he took in his surroundings, he couldn't believe his luck. He was in Bora Bora, a small chain of islands northwest of Tahiti. Being in French Polynesia made the language barrier non-existent for him. He couldn't imagine a prettier place and wished Renee were there with him. Philippe's gaze fell on a couple decked out in flowers as they stood before a pastor on the beach. They are renewing their marital vows. A Tahitian man named Ketoa was at the wheel of the boat. He had noticed what Philippe was looking at and continued, "Many come here to do that." The idea of renewing his vows with Renee made Philippe smile. Ketoa noticed the wedding band on Philippe's finger and asked, "You have a wife. What is her name?" "Renee. I would love to bring her here to do that," he said while pointing to the ceremony. "Do you have children?" "Yes. We have 2 children. Our son is 8 now, and our little Sophie is 6. They are wonderful kids. I wish I could have brought them as well." Philippe then turned his attention back to Ketoa and asked, "Do you have a family?" Ketoa seemed to be about the same age as Philippe. "Yes, I have 2 girls and a boy. We live up the mountain. My wife is a school teacher and my mother lives with us." Ketoa was involved in the black pearl farming business with his brothers, earning a good living. However, by the looks of him and his boat, a rust bucket, one wouldn't assume so. While he was hired to take photos for Tahiti Travel magazine, Philippe had 2 days off and wanted to dive for pearls. They would make a fitting gift for Renee and Sophie. Ketoa instructed him on what to look for once they were in the water. Philippe put his camera away. "Do you realize how beautiful your island is?" "Do you ever get tired of this?" Philippe asked. "I can't imagine waking up every day to this beauty. If I didn't have a family at home, I'd find a way to stay here." Ketoa chuckled. "Then we would be like Hawaii, overrun." "How have you been able to keep the tourists from becoming permanent residents?" Ketoa grinned. "We hardly allow them to work here. No money, no house, no stay. Au revoir." Philippe laughed. "That's smart." Ketoa picked up his knife and asked, "You ready?" Philippe stood to follow. "That I am." He paused as black-tip reef sharks swam below them. Philippe looked over nervously. "Those sharks won't be a problem, will they?" Ketoa laughed in response and jumped into the water. "Here goes nothing," Philippe said. The 2 men spent the next hour along the ocean floor, searching for black-lipped oysters. Ketoa demonstrated great lung capacity, while Philippe frequently returned to the surface to catch his breath. On his 5th dive, Ketoa signaled to Philippe, pointing at a giant oyster. Ketoa gestured for Philippe to grab it. Philippe did so and shot to the surface as quickly as he could, gasping for air as he broke the surface. Once he recovered, he yelled, "Oh!" He held the oyster up to the sky and laughed. "Now that is how you get jewelry." It was exhilarating. Ketoa finally surfaced and swam gracefully back to the boat. "You're not even breathing hard," Philippe chided. Ketoa easily climbed into the boat. Once Philippe was aboard, Ketoa began to cut the oyster open. "Now for the reveal," he said. Once it was mostly ajar, he handed it to Philippe to finish opening. "Ooh," Philippe exclaimed as he pried it open. Inside were 3 lumps under the flesh of the oyster. Philippe took the knife and dug them out. "My friend, what you have given me! 3 pearls! For my 3 pearls at home!" The beauty of the dark, glowing orbs impressed Philippe. He picked one up and held it in the sunlight. "This one has pink in it. This one is for my Sophie." He then pulled out the 2nd pearl, which was the same size and color. "You know, she could have earrings." He noted that the 3rd pearl was much larger and darker in color. "Maybe on a gold chain for your wife," Ketoa suggested. "That is an excellent idea," replied Philippe. What do I get for my boy?" Philippe pondered aloud. Ketoa thought for a moment before brightening. "Look at this." He scraped the flesh out of the shell and held it to the sun. A rainbow of colors shimmered across its concave surface. "We take this shell and make a veneer. Then we press the veneer into practical tools like a knife. He showed Philippe the handle of his blade, which shimmered with turquoise, pink, purple, and blue. "I am a knife maker. I have a knife that is almost complete. Since you brought the shell up from the ocean floor, we will use it to fill the handle, and you can gift this to your son." Philippe was thrilled. "Thank you. This is great." Ketoa offered, "My mother makes the pearls into jewelry, and I create the knives. We can prepare these for you before you fly home." Philippe was beaming. This was one of the best experiences of his life. Mother Earth had given him her beauty, and he would share gifts with his wife and children. It made him feel something he had never felt before. He loved this island, he loved his work, and he was basking in the abundance of blessings that surrounded him. Tragedy seemed a million miles away, but it wasn't. It was just around the corner, and Philippe didn't know it. Chapter 4. Tuesday, June 13th, 1995, Paris, France. Renee sat on an oversized sofa, with both children tucked at her sides. They had calmed down after the initial explosion that rocked the tea party. How would Sophie have known that the photograph was of the place where her father had died? It had never come up in conversation, because it was a painful subject, a closed box, tightly stored, and never to be opened by their mother. But children mature, and that box was now in front of them. Strangely, Renee felt an emotional strength to talk about their father and the day he was lost at sea. Her eyes and face were swollen from crying, and the children didn't look much better. Tissues surrounded them. They had gone through a box. The children felt a closeness to their mother that they hadn't experienced before. Even though this was a sad afternoon, a heaviness had lifted, which had kept them apart since their father's passing. Renee began, "Your father was the love of my life. The first time I saw him, I fell in love." She recounted the story of the night she watched him eat a plate of pasta. Both children smiled as they pictured the scene. This prompted her to share other stories about him, as they exchanged memories. Talking about Philippe brought him back, and it felt like he was in the room with them, laughing and crying. Maybe he was. The sun cast a dull orange glow on the wall behind them. It was nearly 7 p.m., and Renee didn't realize how late it had gotten. "Are you hungry?" she asked. They both chimed in that they were. Trying to get off the couch proved funny, as they all laughed while trying to stand up after being melted into the cushions. Once up, Renee pulled them both in for a final hug. "I love you both so much." Sophie replied, "Mom, I'm glad this afternoon happened." Laurent agreed, "Me too." "Me three," Renee responded with a smile. "What do you want to eat?" Both kids looked up at her and exclaimed, "Pasta!" They laughed as they moved into the kitchen. As Renee prepared their food, Sophie began to form an idea in her head. "Mom, that island is so pretty. How far away is it?" Laurent immediately sensed where this was going. He cheered Sophie on in his head. "It is in the South Pacific Ocean. Maybe after dinner we can look at Grandpa's atlas." Laurent felt encouraged. "Mom, could we go there?" The water in the pot had come to a rolling boil, and she was putting the noodles into the water. She looked thoughtful and was very quiet. Both children looked at each other as anticipation built. She wasn't saying no. She was considering it. Finally, she spoke. "I have wanted to go there. I have wanted to say goodbye to him, to see the last thing he saw, to heal. Lately, I've wanted this very much." A long silence followed, and the kids could tell she wasn't finished. She finally looked up at them, sounding more present. but it will cost money we do not have." Laurent felt a push of hope, recognizing this as almost a yes. "Where there's a will, there's a way," he said. Sophie jumped in. "And grandfather's rich." Renee laughed outright. She knew her father well. There would be no money unless she earned it. Recently, her father had opened rooms to them as finances became tight. In this way, he was willing to help. The settlement after Philippe's death had run out. Renee was a remarkable beauty, but modeling was off the table after having children and losing her husband. She had been working in an accounting firm, but was paid less than her counterparts. The pasta was poured into a colander over the sink, and hot steam filled the kitchen. Renee plated the noodles onto 3 plates. They didn't have Alfredo sauce on hand, but a dash of salt and a pat of butter did the trick. In memory of their father, both kids attacked their food like they hadn't eaten in days. Renee allowed it, laughing and almost crying simultaneously. Laurent looked so much like his father. Sophie burst out laughing at the silliness of it all. With dinner and the dishes done, the kids pulled their mother to see their grandfather in his study. Grandfather was at his desk when they knocked. "Come in," he called. Renee stepped in and greeted her father. "We were wondering if we could look at your atlas." "Oh, absolutely. I was just wrapping up in here, so please make yourselves at home." He stood up and turned to greet the children as they followed their mother in. "What adventures are you having?" Sophie responded, "We want to see Bora Bora." Grandfather looked at Renee, and she raised her eyebrows to her father. "Well, I'll leave you to it." Grandfather left the study, and Renee took up his seat. Chapter 5. Wednesday, March 24th, 1993, Bora Bora, French Polynesia. "Thank you for taking me out again." Ketoa was preparing the boat for their day out at sea. Ketoa had his small son with him. Philippe offered the child a high five, and they both laughed as the boy jumped up to slap his hand without missing. "How old are you?" Philippe asked. "I'm 5," the child responded. Ketoa ruffled his son's hair. "This is Toa. He is my best mate." The boy beamed at his father. "Up you go," Ketoa said, as he easily lifted his son into the craft. Both men climbed in and shoved off. It was a beautiful sunny day, with not a cloud in the sky, except to the south, about 10 miles away. "That looks like a storm," Philippe noted, and Ketoa glanced at it thoughtfully. "Yes, it does. We'll stay ahead of it and be back in before it arrives." Philippe felt disappointed. He had hoped to sail farther out, but his day at sea would be cut short. Pointing northwest, the small boat cut a straight line. The wind whipped at their hair as they enjoyed the spray on their faces. About an hour into the trip, Ketoa cut the engine. The mountain range was far enough away that it looked small, as if it stood just an inch high if one held their fingers up to measure. Ketoa pulled out fishing gear and began to string the line. They planned to have a fire on the beach and cook whatever they caught, hoping it would be yellowfin tuna. Philippe noticed Ketoa glancing at the approaching storm several times as the dark clouds grew more ominous. "It is moving faster than I thought," Ketoa warned. "I think we have about 30 minutes to fish. I'm sorry, Philippe." Philippe sounded cheerful and assured Ketoa it was okay. Nothing could be done. Mother Nature was the boss. Philippe looked around the boat and noted there were no life jackets. After 30 minutes of fishing, Ketoa called it. They would need to head back. Philippe pulled in the fishing line and stowed the pole, noticing that the storm was now dumping heavily on the island. A moment of discomfort washed over him. Ketoa turned the key to start the boat. It clicked, but nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Cursing under his breath, he felt the weight of their situation. Philippe sat quietly, realizing they were in danger. Toa asked his father if he could help. "No, son," was the response. Ketoa tried again, then suggested they let the boat rest for a moment. If they tried too many times, they might flood the engine. Philippe agreed. "Do you have life jackets?" Philippe asked. Ketoa opened a hatch in the door. "Yes, we do." Philippe felt relieved. He was a swimmer, but he didn't feel safe out this far. To Ketoa's alarm, only one life jacket was found. He cursed again. It was a size large. "Put this on," Ketoa directed Philippe. Philippe looked at the small boy and said no. "Put it on your son." Ketoa gauged the distance. Could he swim with his son if the boat were lost? The answer was no. They were too far out. Anger at himself rumbled within him. How could he have put them in this danger? He picked up the radio and began calling the Tahitian Coast Guard. Philippe felt relieved as Ketoa successfully gave their coordinates with a report of the dead engine. The only problem was that without an engine, the boat was drifting. Would the Coast Guard find them in time? Ketoa surmised that Philippe would wear the jacket if the worst happened. They would all kick their way to the island, hanging on to him. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only one he could see. 30 minutes later, the sea became choppy as the sky darkened around them. The storm hit suddenly. At first, it was a deluge of rain, and soon all three of them were shivering. The boat rocked harder. Ketoa tried again to start the engine. Nothing. He kicked and cursed. Toa wrapped his arms around his small body, trying to be brave. The life jacket still sat on the passenger seat. Wasn't there a lesson that teachers used for this kind of scenario? If there were only one life jacket on a boat, and a child on board with two men, who should get the life jacket? Philippe remembered this kind of word problem and chuckled. Ketoa looked at him, and Philippe asked him the question, prompting him to chuckle as well. Teachers posed the same questions in schools here. All jokes aside, they needed a plan. Ketoa lifted his son onto his lap and wrapped his heavy arms around him. The waves grew larger, and signs of the Coast Guard were still nowhere to be seen. Philippe had been keeping track of the time. It had been 1 hour and 10 minutes since they had placed the call. Ketoa, being a realist, said, "We've drifted from our original spot." Philippe could barely hear him over the storm's roar, but he had figured that out anyway. Ketoa held the life jacket out to Philippe. Philippe thought of his two children. He thought of Renee, his beautiful, laughing Renee. He knew he wasn't going to take that life jacket, not when there was a child on board. Lightning struck the water a few yards away, making them jump. Toa began to cry. Both fathers felt their protective instincts intensify. They needed to ensure Toa survived this, even if they didn't. A few minutes later, the night sky erupted with light. Ketoa and Philippe saw a 20-foot wave approaching them. Without hesitating, Philippe jumped up and grabbed the life jacket. With a firm grip, he took Ketoa's hand, slid it into the jacket's hole, and pulled the vest onto him. Ketoa wrapped his arm tightly around his son and shouted as the wave crashed down on their small boat, flipping it over. The boat sank into the dark water. Moments later, Ketoa and Toa's heads broke the surface, both gasping for air. Ketoa frantically looked around, but there was no sign of Philippe. In a panic, he started screaming. Gathering himself, he managed to get his other arm through the hole of the life jacket. Then he pressed his son against his chest as he swam desperately, searching for Philippe. It took a week for the Tahitian Coast Guard to give up the search for the French photographer. Ketoa was overwhelmed with grief. He understood that his own life had been spared, and that he would continue to raise his children. He also recognized that somewhere in France, a devoted mother and her 2 children were mourning the loss of their father. This knowledge left him inconsolable. Chapter 6. Thursday, March 25th, 1993, Paris, France. Renee was pulling clothes out of the dryer when a knock came at the door. The children were in school. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door to find 2 peace officers with grim faces. She knew immediately that her Philippe was gone. They didn't need to say a word. She had been reflecting all day on a dream she had had the night before. She was standing on a beautiful beach. The sun was setting and splashing orange and purple across the sky. She had a crown of flowers on her head. The smell of these flowers swirled around her. She felt a hand pull hers. She looked up, and Philippe stood there, tucking her arm into his. She felt a wash of complete bliss and love at seeing him. He was dressed in a white cotton button-up shirt and white cotton pants. She looked down. They were both barefoot in the sand. Small waves lapped at their feet. The water was so blue. She was in a white dress that moved softly in the breeze. She laughed, overjoyed to see him. "Philippe!" He responded with her name, Renee. Someone cleared his throat. How did she miss that a man stood before them with a Bible open? "What is this?" she cried joyfully, looking at Philippe. He was silent. They stood there, staring into each other's eyes. She felt that she could do this for all eternity. The love she felt for him was overwhelming. She also felt all the love he felt for her. It was so beautiful. Tears began streaming down her face. She was so happy. Philippe pulled her into his embrace and held her tightly. Then he pulled back and kissed her. Renee woke. The dream was so vivid. It were as if she had been transported to his job assignment. Overwhelming love enveloped her all that day, but she also felt a heaviness. What did the dream mean? Now she knew. He had come to say goodbye. Blackness enveloped her as she sunk to the floor. Chapter 7. Wednesday, June 14th, 1995, Paris, France. Sophie's small finger pointed to Bora Bora in the heavy atlas. "Here it is!" she cried. "Bora Bora." She said it slowly. The cat was scratching at the door. Laurent went to open it, and was not surprised when the dog pushed his way into the room as well. "You too! Peas in a pod," said Laurent, laughing. Coco took her place on the leather sofa, and Marlin curled up at its base. Grandfather poked his head in. "Do you need anything else?" Sophie whispered under her breath, "Some money." But he didn't hear her. "Your grandmother and I are turning in." "Thank you, Father. Good night," Renee said. She turned her attention back to the large book. Laurent asked, "Where is Paris?" They quickly found it, and then found Bora Bora again. "That's not too far," Sophie said innocently. "Not too far?" Laurent was incredulous at the simplicity of his sister. How did she not have a grasp on distance? "What do they teach you in school?" he asked. After more research, they found the distance to be 9,787 miles. Renee sat heavily in a chair. Airfare, hotel, meals, and a car would be outrageous. Discouragement began to overtake her. She leaned her head onto her hand and closed her eyes. Ever so gently, she felt a brush of something on her cheek. At that moment, Marlin jumped up and stared at her excitedly. Then his tail began wagging. Again she had lost track of time. Squinting at the clock, she realized it was past 9 p.m. Oh, it was late. She felt tired. Let's go to bed and look at this tomorrow. Both children agreed as they came to her for hugs. My dear babies, she kissed them both on the cheek. It was 9:20 a.m. when Renee awoke the next day. La, I slept too long. She jumped out of bed and showered. As she came to the kitchen, her children were cooking pancakes. Good morning, Mama, Sophie cried. She was wearing a light blue apron with lemons on it. Laurent had set the table. We want to keep talking about Bora Bora, he said. Yes, me too. Wow, you've never done this before, she marveled. Well, we're a team now, and we've got work to do, Sophie said as she waved the spatula. The closeness they felt from the day before was still binding. It was like a magic spell had been cast on them, and the unity they felt was so lovely. After breakfast, we will call a travel agent and get an idea of how much it will cost us. Let's price out a 10-day stay. Both children looked at each other and beamed. Sophie rubbed her hands together in glee. And I have a friend down there. Her name is... I forgot. I will write her and tell her we are coming. Renee interjected. Don't send that idea just yet. We need to see how much this will cost. It might be a few years before we can get the money. The reality of this delay was like a pin popping a balloon. A couple of years? Sophie's arms dropped at her sides, and Laurent's shoulders slumped. The travel agent called back a day later with a price quote, $8,550 for 3 passengers. Oh, this is worse than I thought, Renee said into the phone. Merci, I will be in touch. She hung up the phone and turned back to her children's expectant faces. It is almost $9,000. Sophie had no real-world experience to understand that, and Laurent knew only a little more. Renee continued, That is a lot of money. They sat silently around the table as they searched for ways to obtain the dream. Laurent pushed back from the table and went to a kitchen drawer. He pulled out a notepad and pen. Returning, he sat down. He said, Let's brainstorm. My teacher taught this just last week. Sophie asked, What is brainstorm? Laurent replied, When you have a problem, think up as many ideas as possible to solve it. No idea is a dumb idea. You allow your brain to dump. Here. He tore 2 pages and handed one to each. Sophie jumped up to get pens. Let's spend 15 minutes writing every possible way we know to earn the money. Renee marveled at what a brilliant and resourceful boy Laurent proved to be. She thought, when did he grow into such a little man? The unified effort to solve their dilemma put fireworks in her mind. Every parent hopes their babies grow to be good people. This was magnificent. She didn't feel so alone in carrying the burden. She wished Philippe could see their children. They were amazing. They existed together just yesterday, and now there was a beautiful synergy between them. Renee felt gratitude for a letter from a little Tahitian girl. She thought, I'd love to thank her. What if a picture of Bora Bora hadn't been thrust in front of me? I would not be having this new relationship with my children. They sat with their heads bent over their papers for 15 minutes. Laurent called it. "Okay, let's each hand your paper to the person on your right, and we will read aloud our ideas." This thrilled Sophie. She giggled as she pushed her paper to her mom. Again, Renee sat spellbound at Laurent's ingenuity. Sophie's page was filled with outrageous ideas, and Renee had to stifle a laugh. Halfway down the list, Sophie suggested kidnapping Grandpa. "Why would we kidnap Grandpa?" Renee queried. Sophie said, "We send a ransom letter to Grandma. She needs to pay $9,000 to get him back." "And where will we hide him?" Laurent asked, playing along. Sophie piped up, "In my closet." She smiled. "You said there were no dumb ideas." Laurent devised foregoing future celebrations and used the gift money for the trip. "We have our birthdays and Christmases. We can let the family know that we are working towards a goal, and if they want to donate to it instead of gifts." After reading all the ideas, Renee said, "We need to work smart, not hard." They picked the most realistic ideas and charted how much each paid. All three sank back into their seats once they plugged these ideas into the calendar. 4.5 years. Laurent exclaimed, very dismayed, "I'll be 16 by then." Sophie said sadly, 4.5 years of no birthdays or Christmas. "How badly do you want this trip?" Renee asked. Laurent replied, 5 years is going to pass anyway. I'm willing to plug away. Sophie said, "Me too." "That settles it. I'll set up a bank account, and we'll stash the money away as we earn it." Chapter 8. Monday, September 14th, 1998, Paris, France. 4.5 years flew by. Laurent's grandfather, who had once been an executive for a prestigious fashion house, suggested that they start a shoeshine business in the park. Laurent eagerly jumped at the opportunity. Hundreds of people from all over the world flocked to Paris to experience its fashion scene. Many of them stayed at La Rose de Paris, a stunning 5-star hotel where grandfather had a close friendship with the concierge. "I am proud of you, Laurent," he said warmly. "I have observed your hard work over the past 2 years, and the quality of your work is impressive. I think it's time for you to take a step up in the world." Laurent was speechless. His grandfather wasn't one to give out compliments easily. "I want to introduce you to my friend Peter Dumas, and I would like for you to bring your shoeshine kit." Laurent's eyes widened in surprise. He had no idea what this meeting was about, but he trusted his grandfather completely. They made an appointment to see Monsieur Dumas. As they settled into the car, Laurent noticed a shoebox. "That box contains some very beat-up old shoes," grandfather said. "Please restore them in front of the concierge. We'll see what happens." They arrived at the hotel, and a valet opened the doors for them as they stepped out. "Mouth closed," grandfather whispered, noticing that Laurent's jaw had dropped at the hotel's grandeur. His wife had been a former fashion model, and in her glory days she had dazzled the most powerful men in the world. Their daughter had followed in her footsteps, living a life of glitz and glamour. It dawned on grandfather just how humble and simple life had been for his grandchildren. Nervously, he hoped this was not a mistake. "Gordon, mi amor!" Peter Dumas exclaimed, rushing toward them, thrilled to see his friend. "And who is this?" Peter asked, noticing the young boy. "This young man is my grandson, Laurent. Might we have a private space with you?" Grandfather replied. Peter led them down a beautiful hallway into a small office. Once inside, grandfather sat down and turned his body toward Laurent, offering him silent encouragement. Laurent's face turned scarlet as he understood the message. It was time to shine, both literally and figuratively. He spoke in his most mature voice. "Monsieur Dumas, it is a pleasure to serve you." He bowed slightly. "I have here a pair of shoes." Laurent picked up the box and opened it. He almost gasped at the sight. The shoes were hideously ugly and battered. His mind raced, thinking, "What is grandfather doing to me?" But he pressed on with confidence, as though nothing were amiss. "I will have these shoes in tip-top shape for you, Monsieur Dumas." In just 15 minutes, Laurent transformed the left shoe into beautiful Italian leather. Even grandfather was impressed. Laurent held up the old shoe next to its stunning counterpart. "Magnifique!" cried Peter, admiring the transformation. Laurent felt a bit lost about what to say next, but thankfully grandfather spoke up. "Is there a possibility for Laurent to work in your shoe salon for 2 hours a day?" Monsieur Dumas considered this thoughtfully. "He is under age, but his skill is exemplary. I believe 2 hours a day would be manageable. We have been short-staffed in that area of the hotel. I will ask the manager if we can give Laurent a 2-week trial. May I keep the shoes for now?" That 2-week trial turned into 2.5 more years of shining shoes. Laurent became such a hit with hotel guests that his tips surprised his mom and Sophie. He was polite, polished, and his innocence was refreshing. Guests enjoyed talking to him, and Laurent easily shared his dreams of visiting Bora Bora with his mom and sister. Hard-working young men like him were easy to reward. A soft tap was heard. Angelique was surprised to find her daughter at her bedroom door. "Hello, darling, come in. Well, this is a nice surprise." "Hello, Mom," Renee said wearily. The master bedroom had an elegant sitting area with 2 white love seats that faced each other. 2 purple orchids stood tall on little mahogany tables nearby. The afternoon sun filtered in through the large bay windows. Purple throw pillows, just a shade lighter than the orchids, pulled the room together, along with gilded gold crown molding on the walls. A glittering chandelier of crystals caught the sunlight and scattered points of color everywhere. "Ah, a visit to heaven," Renee said. "Come and sit here. You look like you need a hug." Angelique settled onto the same sofa while rubbing Renee's back. A coffee table before them held a large book with stunning photography of the models that graced the magazine covers in the 1940s and 50s. Some of Angelique's images were found therein. Renee opened the book. She hadn't looked at this in years. She knew right where to find her mom. Page 56. She turned there. A younger Angelique stood statuesque on a staircase. The lighting was dramatic, and the full skirts of her Dior gown dominated the photo. Silk gloves reached her elbows, and chandelier earrings almost touched her shoulders. Her dark hair was in soft curls, brushed away from her face. The photo was black and white, but Renee guessed her mother wore dark red lipstick. Her skin was like porcelain. "Do you remember what you were thinking when this was taken?" Renee asked. Angelique studied the photo. She looked serene, but also like she had a secret. "I know your father was in the building. I know we had just started to fall in love. Maybe I was thinking of him." "It's so nice you got to grow old with him," Renee said. "So many good years together." Angelique did not envy her daughter's pain. To have been so in love and then to have it cut short. It broke her heart to see Renee now. "You look tired." "I am. I just came up here to complain and have you rub my back." She smiled at her mom. "How is the fundraising coming?" "I've asked my boss for a raise twice now, as in 2 years in a row. 'We'll see,' is all he says." "And?" "Nothing. You know, being pretty works well in front of a camera, but not behind a desk. They don't take me serious." "Yes, the curse of beauty," Angelique said quietly. "Why isn't Sophie modeling? Has she ever expressed an interest?" "We have the connections." Modeling is as desirable as Brussels sprouts to her. She'd rather bake for hours than pose. If only she could see the money, she'd hang up the apron. "I've told her about the money. She says it's not her vibe." Angelique laughed. "Those two are very different. They march to their own beat," speaking of Sophie and Laurent. Renee was glad someone else noticed this. "Thank you. If we put a milk pail and a cow in the courtyard, we'd probably see them take to dairy farming. They are very earthy, if that's the right word." It wasn't, but her mom got it. "I'm glad to fund your trip, Renee. You don't have to do this all on your own." "Well, we are only $1,000 away from being done. I actually want to cross the finish line without help. But thank you, Mom. You have given me what I actually needed. And anyway, the rent here is a huge help." Angelique gathered Renee in a hug. "Thank you for coming to see me, darling." It was Renee's turn to strengthen her daughter. She came downstairs to her apartment to find Sophie asleep on a couch. 4 years of waking at 4 a.m. to roll out pastry dough was sapping the young girl. "Oh, hi, Mom." Sophie heard movement and woke from her shallow nap. "How are you, Sophie?" "Awesome." She stretched and yawned. Renee wanted to test a theory. "What if we got a milk cow and put it in the courtyard out back?" Sophie popped up like a daisy. "Mom, that would be so cool. We could sell milk." Renee laughed. She'd have to share that response with her mother later. "And you don't want to model?" Renee tested. "Yuck, why would I want to do that? I mean, no offense, Mom." Renee was too busy laughing to be offended. Sophie was looking at her mother expectantly. "Mom." "Yes?" "Let's get back to that cow idea." "Oh, what have I created?" thought Renee. "Sophie, we are not getting a cow. I was just wondering how you would respond to that idea." Sophie flopped back. "Mom, don't ever tempt me like that again." At the end of 4.5 years, Laurent made enough money to pay for his trip and most of Sophie's. As Renee worked her regular job, she and Sophie baked pastries at 4 a.m. every day. These delicacies were sold to 2 cafes nearby. However, their baking job did not pay as much as Laurent's, but they too hit their financial goals. The big day came. Renee called their travel agent. She gave the parameters: 10 days, Bora Bora, 3 people, flights, hotel, and car. After an hour on the phone, she gave the agent her credit card number. It was done. The trip to Bora Bora was paid for. Her children stared expectantly. She turned around, beaming. Slipping into a chair, she gave them the great news. It was $500 cheaper than the estimate they originally got. "Wow," Laurent said. "We're going," Sophie said in amazement. Both children felt they had aged 10 years, not just 4.5. They felt happy and worn out. Renee said with emotion, "I am so proud of us." Chapter 9. Friday, June 1st, 2001. 33,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. Laurent had grown into a handsome young man. His hair now fell in soft waves around his face. His dark eyes were intelligent and kind. Gone was the thin boy of 10. His frame had filled out with muscle. Like his father, his broad shoulders tapered to a trim waist. Despite being 16, he looked older, nearing 6 feet tall. Sophie was 13 and already possessed the marked beauty of her mother and grandmother. She had long hair, large expressive eyes, and a kind demeanor. Both children had grown to be very beautiful inside and out. Their relationship with their mother deepened over the years as they worked together with the goal of reaching French Polynesia. "My legs are cramped," Sophie said as she asked Laurent to let her out of the middle seat on the Boeing 737. Although she had long legs, she was still the shortest of the three. As she approached the aisle to stretch, Laurent noticed an open letter she had left behind. He picked it up, finding it was from Vairani T. Bora Bora. Needing something to do, he began reading. It was the pen pal friend, written in typical rounded feminine handwriting with lots of exclamation marks. Vairani was excited to see Sophie face to face and asked her to call when they had settled in. Her parents were hoping to invite them over for dinner. Laurent's interest trailed off as he folded the letter and placed it back down. Over the years spent saving for the trip, Sophie and Vairani had exchanged dozens of letters. A real friendship had developed, and both girls knew everything about each other. They wrote about boys they liked, the food they loved, subjects in school, dances they attended, and how many boys had asked them to dance. Their letters always featured stickers on the envelopes: ice cream cones, unicorns, rainbows, and teddy bears. As large X's marked the calendar and the trip neared, the letters between the girls focused on finer details of what they would do when Sophie arrived. Vairani had a waterfall she wanted to show Sophie, a treehouse that she and Toa built, and they could even sleep in it if they wanted. She also mentioned her favorite ice cream place. Chapter 10. Friday, June 1st, 2001. Bora Bora, French Polynesia. Sophie began squealing as their plane tilted its wingtips down and to the left. They felt their bodies lean into the turn. The small oval window allowed them to see the towering majestic peaks of the Tahitian mountain range. This view thrilled the children so long ago, and now they were really here. Renee took both of the children's hands and squeezed them. The excitement of this moment was surreal. The air smelled of flowers as they stepped onto the tarmac. "Wow," Sophie inhaled deeply. "It smells wonderful here." They felt miles away from Paris, yet strangely as if they had just come home. Renee's thoughts immediately turned to her husband. She felt his presence, as if he were waiting for her with a lei and a kiss. Her eyes moistened. Laurent thought similarly. So this is where Dad was. A closeness to their father began, and it felt sweet. They imagined his imprint on everything they saw: the baggage claim, the rental car counter, the car itself. "Maybe Dad rented this car," Sophie said. Renee was touched at how much her children missed their father. It struck her. She had not been aware of their grief through this. Sadness came at this realization. Laurent noticed her. "You okay, Mom?" She pulled the car into a grocery store parking lot and lowered her head. "Laurent, Sophie, I've not been there for you. I have not been a comfort to you in the loss of your father. I am so sorry." She looked at each of their faces. Sophie met her with a cheerful look. "It's okay, Mom. This is our healing trip." Laurent felt the truth of what she was saying. He had been left to grieve by himself, and it hurt him deeply. To hear her acknowledge her selfishness was a balm. but it was still very painful. Mom, I've needed to hear you say that. Renee's face registered shock. He continued, I have forgiven you. As he said this, he wasn't sure it were true. He was surprised how available his anger was. Okay, maybe I haven't. Laurent was good at honesty. Renee looked blankly over the steering wheel into the parking lot's faded yellow lines. Another sealed box was open before them, a box she didn't know existed. What about that night we had the long talk on the couch and then we ate pasta? She said numbly and a little defensive. Yeah, but it was 2 years late. I needed you, Mom. I needed someone, and there was no one. I was only 8. A hint of something came to his mind, but he couldn't remember it. It would come later. Sophie had deflated. This island was going to be wasted if this dark cloud followed them through the next 10 days. Okay, I did not bake pastries for years to have the vacation ruined. Laurent, be angry for a few more minutes, and then we are going to shake this off. She did a light-hearted shaking dance in the back seat, fluttering her fingers in his direction, as if to transfer good vibes. Laurent looked at his sister. She was right. He needed to pull up. He slapped both of his thighs and took the challenge. Okay, I'm done sulking. I'll get therapy later. Let's go. Sophie pumped her fist and said, Yes, Bora Bora. Renee began driving again, but the exchange shook her. Renee hadn't told her children what their hotel looked like. She wanted it to be a surprise. While checking in at the front desk, Laurent's height allowed him to see the thatch-roofed bungalows over the water. No way! He exclaimed. Sophie stood on tiptoe to see over a wall of tropical plants. A young Tahitian man asked them to follow him as he took their bags and led them out of the lobby and down a wooden walkway. The turquoise ocean flanked the wooden path on both sides. Are you kidding me? Laurent yelled back to his mom. Both children's eyes and mouths were wide open with amazement as they walked along, taking everything in. Is this our hotel, Mom? Sophie asked incredulously. Renee began to shake the heaviness of moments before. Yes, she replied. She was still subdued. With that, both children began jumping and yelling with excitement. The young man leading the way smiled. The kids were still cheering as they pushed the door open. Their mother tipped the young man, and they ran out onto the back deck, overlooking the stunning ocean and mountains. Laurent threw all caution to the wind, stripped down to his boxers, and flung himself into the ocean. Sophie laughed, feeling blissfully happy to have finally made it to their dream destination. Sophie hurried to her suitcase, unzipping it, and pulled out her bathing suit. Within less than 2 minutes, she was changed and bounding past her mom. Suddenly, she slid to a stop. Laurent noticing his sister's movement from his spot in the water. Sophie returned to her mom and threw her arms around her. Thank you, Mom. Laurent was back on their deck, rushing toward them and throwing his arms around his mom and sister. Dripping water everywhere as he chimed in, Thank you, Mom. He noticed she was still struggling from their previous conversation. Mom, let's just do this. Before she knew it, Laurent hoisted her over his shoulder. Sophie marched happily alongside her brother as they tromped toward the water. All three disappeared over the edge. Warmth enveloped Renee as the water closed over her head. Her jeans felt heavy, but she kicked her way to the surface. Laurent swam over to her. He pulled her into a hug and held her. Mom, I love you. I'm going to be okay. You're going to be okay. She wept into his shoulder and repeatedly said, I am sorry. Laurent was able to let it go, and Renee felt it wash away. The immense ocean took it, and it was never heard of again. Chapter 11. The following 2 days were absolute bliss. Renee felt like a third child, playing all day and sleeping heavily at night. They savored ripe papaya, which melted in their mouths, fresh pineapple, mangoes, and bananas. Each morning they woke refreshed and went to bed tired from their adventures. The sun deepened their skin to a golden brown, and they no longer resembled the tired, weary travelers they had been just 48 hours ago. "Oh, I never want to leave," Sophie said with a contented sigh. Her mother fingered a strand of Sophie's hair and marveled at her daughter. It was nearing 10 p.m., and weariness was setting in. Laurent had fallen asleep some time ago, and a soft snore could be heard from the sofa across from them. He was far too big for it. His well-muscled frame was bent and folded uncomfortably. His swim shorts had dried on him, which was how they lived now, a happy, carefree family. There was no concern for clothing or time. When they were hungry, they ate. When they were hot, they jumped in the water. And when they were tired, they collapsed onto the nearest couch and fell asleep. Renee remembered when she could easily lift and carry him to bed. Sophie interrupted her thoughts. "Mom, do you remember how I wished Grandpa would pay for our trip here?" Renee looked at her daughter, sensing some wisdom was about to emerge. Sophie continued, "I'm glad we worked for 4 years to pay for this." 4.5 years, her mother corrected her with a smile. Baking and delivering pastries seemed never ending. As Sophie grew older, much of that work fell to her. Her skills as a baker could rival those of a professional pastry chef. Balancing that with school and homework made this vacation all the more sweet. "I feel like we can accomplish anything as a family now," Renee marveled. She continued, "Well, we have a big day tomorrow. We will meet your friend and her family. Let's go to bed, shall we?" Renee tried to wake Laurent to coax him to his bed, but he was so profoundly asleep that she decided to let him be. Chapter 12. Meeting new people can be awkward, and the opportunity to meet Vairani and her family was no exception. Sophie felt a mix of nerves and excitement, while Renee and Laurent appeared slightly on edge. Laurent begged his mother to stay behind in the bungalow, but she was adamant that they all go. As their car rental drove along the narrow road, they soon spotted the small store, painted a cheerful yellow, just as described. The store seemed to be family-owned and was surrounded by tropical plants and beautiful flowers. Inside, they could find almost anything they needed: soda, eggs, milk, butter, chips, diapers, and foods prepared by the locals. They parked near the front door, where Vairani's dad would meet them and guide them up the mountain. Without this arrangement, they might never have found Vairani's family homestead, as there were no street signs. They arrived early, but so did their host. He recognized them immediately, noting their nervous expressions and the description his daughter had given him. He approached the driver's window with a hint of nervousness. "Yorana," he greeted them, followed by the French equivalent, "Bonjour." He was fluent in both French and Tahitian. Renee jumped a bit and then turned red. "Bonjour," she replied awkwardly. They began talking over each other in a flurry of words, until he laughed gently and said, "Follow me." Soon their vehicle was bumping up a dirt road behind his. Within 10 minutes, the thick tropical vegetation opened up to reveal a beautiful homestead featuring a charming plantation home, also painted canary yellow. A rusted metal roof crowned it, and a cement porch led to a lovely rectangular yard of neatly clipped green grass. A large breadfruit tree stood in the yard, its leaves appearing to wave hello as big green orbs of breadfruit hung from its branches. Across the yard, an avocado tree and a grove of cocoa trees added to the scene, while red hibiscus flowers lined the lush green space. It looked idyllic. Dogs barked and roamed around the 2 cars as they came to a stop, and the father jumped out first to shoo the dogs back under the house. As they climbed out of the car, a thin 12-year-old girl nervously approached them, determined to cross the yard to meet this family of semi-strangers. Sophie tried to smile easily, but both girls were shy, and Sophie felt a pang of alarm at how difficult it was to meet someone she knew but didn't truly know. "Hi," Sophie offered. "Hi," Vairani replied. Awkward laughter followed. The front door opened, and more family members spilled out. Who was in charge of the introductions? No one seemed to know. The two girls fumbled in conversation, until finally Vairani's father took the lead. "My name is Ketoa," he said, gesturing to a woman of similar age beside him. "This is my wife, Hina, and my mother, Tiani." Both women nodded in greeting. Just then, a young boy appeared around the side of the house, unaware that their guests had arrived. He had a stick over his shoulder and a dog at his heels. "Come," Ketoa called for his son to say hello. "This is my son, Toa." Toa managed a shy, mumbled hello. He was a lean boy who looked about 10 years old. Laurent decided to take the initiative. Leaning over to Toa, he offered his hand. "I am Laurent. I am happy to meet you." Toa accepted the older boy's firm handshake, making an immediate connection. Laurent, who did not have a little brother, felt pleasantly surprised by his instinct to protect and befriend the young boy. All of Laurent's nervousness seemed to evaporate, lifting everyone's spirits. Ketoa invited everyone into the house to sit. The screen door squeaked loudly as they entered the small home. Bamboo furniture filled the living room, and Renee and her children settled onto the stiff, vinyl-covered cushions. Woven mats carpeted the floor, and to Renee's surprise, there was a piano against the wall. She wondered which of the children played. Toa was animatedly chatting with Laurent, who was fully engaged, laughing and asking him questions. Renee smiled as she observed Sophie and Vairani in a corner, heads close together and talking. The moment felt surreal. They were not in Paris doing their daily grind, but here in this home belonging to a family in the mountains of Bora Bora. She marveled at life and this random act that had flung them to the other side of the world. No one seemed to notice that hours had passed until hunger pangs prompted Hina to suggest they needed to eat. Clearing her throat, she turned to her husband and asked about dinner arrangements. Ketoa stood and asked if Renee would join them for dinner. There was a hotel about 10 minutes away where his daughter worked, and they served excellent seafood. Toa eagerly asked his father if he could ride in Laurent's car. Sophie asked Renee if she could ride with Vairani and her family. The answer was a unanimous yes. Chapter 13. A friendly Tahitian girl with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and thick-rimmed glasses welcomed them at the host area. She greeted them as if they were family. The older daughter, thought Laurent. He'd wondered what she grew up to look like. Both families were ushered to their seats, skipping any introduction. "The show is starting, so you must be seated now." She apologized for the rush and handed them each a menu. "The server will take your order after the intro." And with that, the girl was gone. Laurent was adjusting his eyes to the tiny print on the menu when an explosion of drums jolted him so hard that his menu fell to the floor. Toa began to laugh, but was checked by a stern look from his father. Neither Renee nor her children noticed the 8 drummers seated on the stage, and now they could not ignore them. 6 of them held thick wooden logs upright. These logs had been hollowed out, and their sticks hitting the wood woke something bordering on primal. The drummers' hands flew like lightning as they beat out an island rhythm that Renee, Laurent, or Sophie would ever forget. All 3 of their mouths gaped open. Renee quickly clamped hers shut and nudged the other 2. Hina and Ketoa smiled at each other for the effect this had on their guests. Tahitians knew how to impress. "Dinner and a show," Hina said to Renee as she smiled. The The server appeared as soon as the introduction drumming was over. A stereo system played steel guitar music, and the server made the final scribbles on her notepad. Ketoa helped Renee, Sophie, and Laurent with menu suggestions. Sophie ordered the same dish as Vairani, poulet fafa, a fried chicken specialty. Renee took the seared ahi tuna with mango chutney, and Laurent was adventurous, ordering octopus. When in Rome, he said confidently to his mother. Renee smiled. The drummers returned, moving their logs into the upright position. The drums are called toeres, Hina explained to Renee. Red iron bark is the tree. The drummers laid into their instruments, and Hina's voice was drowned out. Everyone was quite famished as the plates of food arrived. Sophie rubbed her hands together. She was so hungry. Laurent's dish had tentacles all over it, which set Renee to smiling again. She couldn't wait to see him eat that. No one spoke as they tucked in. All were hungry. Ketoa looked up from his meal. He had noted the change in the drumming pattern and knew the show was about to start. "My other daughter," was all he said as he jerked his head toward the stage. Then he went back to eating. A dancer had entered the stage. She caught Laurent's attention. She was beautiful, wearing a skirt of blonde fibrous strands and coconut shells as her top covering. Her long hair fell like a waterfall past her waist. Laurent forgot himself. The moment Renee saw the girl, she put a peripheral side-eye on her son. She wanted to see his reaction. Renee gasped. 2 rubbery octopus tentacles protruded from Laurent's mouth. As he stared at the dancer, he was frozen, his eyes like saucers. His mind flipped as he thought back to the host who had seated them. That wasn't their daughter. This is the daughter. The drummers slowed their beat, and Tiani's hips matched the cadence. Her hands slowly lifted her hair and let it fall. Laurent blushed profusely. This dance was so intimate. He looked down and noted that something was sticking out of his mouth. He must have been in mid-chew. His eyes shot up to find hers staring at him, and she was stifling a laugh. It had taken all of her concentration to remember her solo. It was the longest dance she'd had to endure, as tears formed in the corners of her eyes. She was grateful when the other dancers came out, and she could exit to the back. Renee's mood went bittersweet as she saw Philippe covered in pasta sauce long ago. How she missed him. It was so ironic that her son was just like his father, forgetful of everything else. Ketoa and Hina were aware of the effect their daughter had on the young man. With dinner over and the show wrapped up for the night, the 2 families stood in the parking lot waiting for Tiani to come out. Laurent was a wreck. He stooped down to check his teeth in the mirror. Not that it mattered, she just saw a creature crawling out of him. Curses, why didn't I use my knife to cut smaller pieces? Renee saw him do a tiny kick to the tire. She came over and rubbed his back. It's okay, son. I promise. You probably impressed her like your dad impressed me. She smiled and turned her attention to the beautiful girl who had just entered their circle. This is my daughter Tiani, named after her grandmother, Ketoa offered. Tiani pulled Renee into an embrace and kissed her cheek. She did the same for Sophie. Laurent was a mess. He was afraid of screwing up, so he stayed where he was. He was all nerves and anger. He gave her a feeble wave and mumbled something. That night, the moaning and punching of pillows could be heard. His vacation was ruined. Chapter 14. Would Laurent live? He did. Would he stop cringing? Yes. The next morning, a knock came at their bungalow door. It was the 2 sisters and Toa. Laurent ran to the bathroom when he heard their voices, and his self-coaching started all over again. Okay, do not act stupid, as he stared at his reflection in the mirror. Is that it? He pulled his hair away from his face. Whew. He looked up his nose. Next, he began pumping toothpaste onto his toothbrush. Brush, rinse, spit. Breathe. What is your problem? Haven't you ever seen a girl before? He continued to talk to himself. Yes, I had a crush on Sarah in the 6th grade. Yeah, but Sarah didn't look like that. Sarah was a beanpole. He placed his fingers on his pulse. His heart was pounding like a pack of toere drums. He remembered the drums. He remembered the dance. That was no Sarah up there. That was a woman. Laurent realized time had passed and he was no longer a boy. Where have I been? With your face down, shining shoes. His mind chimed again. A sharp rap on the door startled him. Laurent jumped. Coming! His voice squeaked. His hands flew over his mouth. It was Sophie. Laurent, we have guests. Laurent cleared his throat and produced the most manly voice he could muster. I'll be right out. Sophie shot a quizzical look at the door. Taking a sniff into each armpit, Laurent yanked the door open and strutted out like a cool cat. He walked down the hall and into the living room. Seated on the couch was Tiani. She was radiant. He wondered if she tasted like a coconut. What a dumb thought! Stop being stupid! Hello, he said, still trying to appear unaffected. Then Tiani smiled at him. Her teeth were so white, he wanted to melt onto the floor. She had the most beautiful eyes. Every cheesy love thought was pinging around in Laurent's head. Tiani wore her hair in a ponytail with a plumeria flower tucked behind her ear. Her jogging shorts and tank top showcased her long legs and perfect physique. Laurent had forgotten there were other people in the room. Toa looked a little bewildered. What happened to his new friend who wanted to talk to him yesterday? He glanced at his big sister and rolled his eyes. Gross, he mouthed under his breath. Ma'am, may I jump off your deck and go swimming? Toa asked politely. Renee noted the boy's hurt. Yes, absolutely. Let me know when you all get hungry. I hope you all stay for lunch. Sophie and Vairani emerged from the room in their bathing suits. The last one in is a rotten egg, shouted Sophie as she and Vairani raced to beat Toa. Toa's energy surged as he dove into the water, beating both girls. They all came up for air laughing. Renee asked Tiani if her dad had dropped them off. No, I have a scooter, she replied. All 3 of us fit on it. Her perfect smile flashed for a moment before she grew quiet, feeling awkward about showing up on their doorstep. Her father had asked her to escort the 2 younger children to their new friends, and Tiani was glad to do it. She was intrigued by Sophie's handsome brother. Laurent had never ridden a scooter before, and suddenly the thought of being on one with her seemed perfect. Before he knew it, he said, I would love to see the island. Can you show me around? Wow, that came out smooth, he thought. Even Renee's eyebrows raised in a silent expression of, well done, son. Laurent felt rewarded when he saw Tiani's face brighten at the idea. I would love to take you, she said, grinning widely. Laurent mirrored her smile, and Renee had to quickly retreat to her room to do a victory dance. The scooter was a bit rusty, but Laurent didn't care. Tiani sat astride it and looked back at him as he got on. He was still reeling from the entire situation. Just the night before, he had thought his world was over, and now he felt like a million fireworks were exploding inside of him. Where do I put my hands? He asked nervously. He searched for something behind him to hold on to. What was once there had broke off. Hold on to my waist. It took a moment for Laurent to process that. Hold on to your waist, he thought, a smile breaking across his face as he floundered in this beautiful idea. Internally he was yelling, I am never letting go of your waist. On the outside he appeared perfectly calm. Tiani and Laurent were grateful they couldn't see each other's faces. The purple haze had struck, and it was a miracle they could keep upright on that rickety scooter. Tiani was thrilled as Laurent's strong hands found her waist. She knew how to enhance the commitment. She put the kickstand up and twisted the throttle. The scooter hesitated, then surged forward. Laurent almost fell off the back as both of them took off. Chapter 15. The scooter glided smoothly along the paved road. Tiani playfully maneuvered it, swerving back and forth as they leaned into the curves. Laurent released his hold on her, extending his arms out to the sides as if he could fly. Trees and flowers rushed past them. The blue ocean called to them, while tall green mountains rose like giants into the clouds, seeming to stand as sentinels that had guarded these islands for thousands of years. Now it was Laurent and Tiani's turn to enjoy this paradise. Tiani occasionally stopped to show him waterfalls, hidden coves, and scenic outlooks. When they grew hungry, she pulled over to a roadside hut and ordered food for both. They took their plates and drinks to sit under a palm tree on the beach. Laurent loved the boom of the waves pounding the sand. Looking out over a blue sea was a close second. Laurent asked a question his father asked a Tahitian man years earlier. "Do you ever get tired of this?" His hand motioned to the waves and the mountains. "I don't," she smiled. She was the prettiest part of the island. Of course she was born here, a perfect pairing. "Do you ever wish to see other parts of the world?" "No." "Oh, come on, how about Paris? How about the Eiffel Tower? Or the Sahara Desert? Antarctica?" "No," she said, laughing. Her simple life was interesting to him. "What do you do outside of school and the restaurant?" "I love diving." "Ah, okay." Laurent felt he was getting somewhere. "When you dive, what is your favorite thing to see?" "Sea life." She wasn't one for long answers, but Laurent enjoyed the dig. "If you had a superpower, what would it be and why?" Tiani laughed. "You're funny." Superpower." Laurent interrupted. "Do you wish you could fly?" "I do fly. When I'm underwater, swimming with the turtles and the sea life, I'm suspended in weightlessness and I move with them. I am one with them." Wow. Laurent pictured it and wanted to experience that with her. "Do you use tanks?" "Rarely. I prefer a mask and fins." Tiani was the coolest girl Laurent had ever met. "Things can eat you down there. Are you ever scared to dive?" Tiani smiled. "I did get scared once." "Just once?" "Okay, tell me. What did you see that scared you?" "I didn't see it at first. It held me, bound. I could not swim to the surface for air." Laurent sat up in alarm. "It was an octopus. I was swimming along the floor when it reached out and wrapped two of its tentacles around my arm. The more I struggled, the more it held. It had anchored itself to a rock. I was no match for it. I used the same rock as leverage to push off, using my leg strength, but that didn't work at all." "Who saved you?" Laurent asked in alarm. "I was there by myself." "But how did you escape?" "I said a prayer. I asked God to help me. There was no other way. I said, 'Please send me an angel to save me.' When I knew I couldn't hold my breath another second, the octopus released me and I shot to the surface." Laurent couldn't speak. His mouth hung open. "And you had no tanks? And you're not pulling my leg? And you almost died?" Tiani had become somber, remembering it. He could see she was not spinning a tale. He almost lost her when he didn't even know her back then. "How old were you when this happened?" 10. "Your parents let you into the ocean when you were 10?" "A lot of 10-year-olds swim in the ocean," she said. She was touched by his concern. "Do you know what that is equivalent to? Going to the zoo, but there are no cages. Just go in there, 10-year-olds. Just walk around with the tigers and lions." He was being facetious. She had never thought about it like that, but he had a point. She had shared enough about her underwater adventures. She'd keep the rest under wraps. "So what about you?" she asked. "What is something that scared you, and how did you escape?" Laurent went quiet. "I was 8 when we got word that my dad died." I never told this to my mom. She looked like she had enough to deal with. When it finally sunk in that he was never coming back, I laid in my bed, and I cried like a whole ocean was coming out of my eyes. I'm surprised no one heard me or came to comfort me. I felt so alone. I wanted to die so I could be with him. He was my best friend. I loved when we spent Saturday mornings together. What did you do on those mornings? Tiani saw the pain leave and warmth come into Laurent's eyes. We'd start with breakfast at our favorite cafe. I loved a crepe with ham and cheese. He loved his with chocolate and strawberries, and black coffee to balance it out. Laurent sounded like he was quoting his father, and Tiani smiled. Then we'd walk in the park, and he'd ask me how my week went, how school went. He was present that way. Usually he was on assignment, and we didn't have him. When we did, he was all in. Anyway, when I was laying in that bed drowning in my sorrow that night, Laurent paused. I prayed too. He looked at Tiani. This memory tried to nudge its way in when talking with his mom earlier. Now it came in full clarity. How could he have forgotten this? I asked God to send my father back so he could hug me. Laurent saw Tiani wipe her eyes. I didn't feel arms around me, but I felt a peace, like a warm blanket over me, and I immediately fell asleep. Only heaven knew Tiani's angel and Laurent's were one and the same. A big round orange sun hung low in the sky. We'd better get back, Laurent said. They had lost track of time. They dusted themselves off as they stood. Tiani moved in towards Laurent. May I hug you? She asked tentatively. The request needed only one answer. Laurent pulled her into him. She meant to comfort him, but being in his arms made Tiani feel like the world snapped into its perfect heaven. They held each other for as long as they needed, Tiani pouring her strength into him and vice versa. Thank you, she said, smiling up into his face. She kissed his cheek and stepped back. Laurent was never going to be the same. Come on, she said as she took his hand. Will you drive? He took the keys from her and she gave a quick lesson. The scooter zipped home as the sky burned orange. Laurent felt the warmth of Tiani on his back and the tightness of her arms around his waist. How was he going to get on a plane and leave this? Renee looked at Laurent and asked, So, tell me how it went. Tiani and her siblings had just left. Laurent was subdued. Sophie finally caught on and realized there was a spark between Tiani and Laurent. Wow, Sophie said, I can't believe you'll get a pen pal out of this too. I like her, Mom, he admitted, falling silent again. Going back to Paris, to the store, to shining shoes. His voice trailed off. He didn't know he was dead until meeting her. Well, they invited us for breakfast tomorrow, so at least we have that, Renee said, her voice tinged with sadness. It was one thing to have a spouse gone forever, but witnessing her son experience loss while the girl was still on earth felt miserable. She thought privately, they are young, life will move on, and they will forget. Chapter 16. As they drove up the gravel driveway, the sound of their car wheels could be heard by the family inside. It was 10 a.m., and the smell of bacon wafted from the house. Toa emerged to shoo the dogs away from their guests. Laurent squinted through the dark screens, scanning for Tiani. You've got it bad, Sophie said, shaking her head. Tiani's heart jumped when Laurent walked in. He looked just as handsome as he had the night before, and she noticed that he immediately searched for her. When their eyes met, he lit up. Ketoa and Hina exchanged glances, recognizing the chemistry. They had hosted this breakfast for that reason. Laurent approached the kitchen and stood near Tiani, eyeing how cute she looked in an apron. Can I help with anything? He asked. Sophie rolled her eyes. He hadn't wanted to help with the pastries at home. He said he was too tired after shining shoes. Boy, she thought, wait until they were alone together so she and Vairani could compare notes on these two lovebirds. Remembering that Laurent had paid for most of her airfare, Sophie decided to rein it in. He never made her feel bad for what he did for her, and suddenly she hoped Tiani was deserving of her brother. Tiani took a piece of pancake and fed it to Laurent, and they both laughed as he commented on how delicious it was. Okay, I am going to puke, Sophie thought. She glanced at Vairani, who was waiting for a sign to work up the same disgust, and when their eyes met, the two girls burst out of the front door and onto the lawn, rolling in the grass and laughing loudly enough to shake the mountain. Grandma Tiani joined them, having not been out much and remaining mostly silent. This was only the second time Renee saw the older woman. The food had everyone in a good mood, and they enjoyed their meal together as they chatted. Vairani and Sophie settled under the breadfruit tree, while Laurent and Tiani sat at the opposite end of the yard. Toa was dangling bacon in front of his dog. Sophie recalled a photo in which this dog seemed to be approaching whoever had taken the picture. She remembered telling Marlin that he could write to this dog. So much time had passed since then. It felt strange to be here, seeing everyone in real life, but it was better than she'd hoped. Renee was inside with Ketoa and Hina when his mother asked the unthinkable. "Where's your husband?" Like many older folks, Grandma Tiani had lost her filter, and whatever was on her mind came out of her mouth. Ketoa looked alarmed by such a personal question. "Mama," he began, but Hina, who was wondering the same thing, stayed silent, curious. Renee felt all the air leave her, as if she had been punched in the gut. She did not want to discuss Philippe. Ketoa noticed her reaction, and his concern deepened, mirrored by Hina's confusion. Renee stammered. He died some years ago." Her hands fidgeted nervously. "How did he die?" Grandma Tiani's question shot out. "Mama!" Ketoa exclaimed, leaning over to her, demanding that she stop. Renee felt nauseous but decided to answer. "He went missing while he was out to sea, here in Bora Bora, about 6 years ago." She then turned away to hide her pain. Ketoa went ramrod straight, and all the color drained from his face. Hina was having a similar reaction. How is this woman in my house? How did he not recognize this family or her name? "Philippe!" Ketoa choked out. At the sound of her husband's name, Renee's head snapped up. She spun around to them. What? Did she just hear him say Philippe? Had she ever told these people his name before? No. All three stood staring in disbelief. Finally, a sob broke from Ketoa and he crumpled into a chair. "How did you know that name?" she demanded. All warmth had vanished, and raw emotion consumed Renee. Ketoa couldn't answer, so Hina stepped in. "Your husband was in our boat." A horrible noise erupted from Renee's chest, and she stumbled out of the house. Laurent and Sophie jumped to their feet at the sound of their mother. Noticing her fumbling for her keys, she didn't give them any directions. Instead, she yanked open the driver's door and climbed inside. The children instinctively rushed to the car and got in. Renee drove like a maniac down the mountain, sobbing. Laurent looked at Sophie worriedly. Once they reached their bungalow, Renee went to her room and shut the door. It felt like she'd lost Philippe all over again. The wound reopened, the pain felt fresh. Laurent and Sophie fell asleep on the living room couches, talking late into the night, only guessing what had happened. Chapter 17. Renee's face was swollen from crying so hard the night before. She lay in bed like a zombie. Sophie cautiously ventured in, trailed by Laurent. They saw her eyes open, but she wasn't looking at anything. Laurent noted the rise and fall of her chest. Relief washed over him. They sat on her bed and waited for her to acknowledge them. Finally, Sophie gently squeezed her mother's hand. Mama? Tears rolled down Sophie's face. Mama, she pleaded again. A hoarse croak came from Renee. Yes. Her throat sounded dry and cracked. Laurent left and quickly returned with a glass of water. He helped her sit up and brought the cup to her lips. She sipped it first and then found her strength and drained the entire glass. Laurent instructed Sophie, "Refill this." Sophie dashed away and returned with another glass. Laurent held it to Renee's lips and she drained it again. Her eyes soon closed and her breathing evened out. "She's asleep again," Sophie said. For 2 days, Renee woke only long enough to drink water. She never used the bathroom or spoke. Laurent was eager to speak with Tiani about what she knew. What had happened? Were they welcome there? What would happen if they went up to their house? "I need answers," Laurent said to Sophie, frustration evident in his voice. All of their guesses had driven him half mad. Both kids bolted into the room when they heard a moan. Their mother sat up in bed. "Help me up," she begged. They each took a side as she guided them to the kitchen. "I'm hungry," she said. "Can you fix some eggs?" Sophie sprang into action as she cracked and scrambled the eggs. "2 more, please," Renee said. 2 more eggs joined the pan. "Orange juice," Renee added weakly. Eating food miraculously revived Renee. Color returned to her face and strength to her limbs. "Your dad was lost at sea while in Katoa's boat," she stated without any build-up. "Dad died on their boat?" Laurent sat back in a chair so stunned that he could not speak further. "I remember receiving a letter from the man who was on the boat with Dad. Katoa wrote." He tried to explain what happened and express his devastation. "Did you write him back?" Sophie asked. "No, I'm not sure I even finished reading who sent it," Renee said. "How did we end up with this family?" she asked, swimming through her thoughts. Sophie answered, "The pen pal program." Her mother looked closely at her daughter. "Who chose Vairani for you?" "My teacher did. She handed me a paper with the name and address." And actually, Sophie's head tilted as she recalled, everyone else in my class got pen pals from another island chain, Somamom. She gave up trying to recall its name. The teacher got confused because my pen pal was the only one from Bora Bora, which made no sense. Laurent said slowly, "So chance brought us together with this family that Dad was with when he died?" A chill ran through each of them. Suddenly, the white curtains that hung on either side of the glass door to the deck billowed softly inward. The air carried the sweet smell of flowers, and a peaceful feeling enveloped each of them. "Wow, what was that?" Sophie asked. Renee looked at her children. Gone was the feeling of confusion. A new memory came to Renee's mind. The letter Katoa wrote many years ago was vividly present in her mind's eye. She saw the sentence describing Philippe, forcing the life vest onto Katoa as he held tightly onto a little boy. Then the wave hit. As this memory surfaced, she explained it to Laurent and Sophie. "I'd guess the little boy was Toa," Laurent said. All 3 of them wiped their cheeks, recalling Toa's sweet face. Their father had known this child and saved his life. Suddenly, Laurent jumped up. "I'm going. You can stay, but I'm going to their house." Sophie stood as well and looked at her mother. Renee reached out both her hands so they could pull her up. "Okay," she said. Chapter 18. Once again, their car wheels crunched on the gravel road as they approached the house. How would they be received? What was the family going through? As the car stopped, Ketoa emerged from the house. His face looked just as worn as Rene's. Hina followed, along with Tiani, Vairani, and finally Toa. Each of their frames sagged. Guilt was etched on their faces, as they were the reason this family no longer had a father. Toa looked the most wilted, and new tears began to stream down his 10-year-old face. Laurent noticed this and approached the boy, sweeping him up in a crushing hug. Toa's body shook with sobs as he repeated, "I am sorry. I am so sorry." "No, no, no," Laurent comforted him. "You have nothing to be sorry for. We are so thankful you are here. We are so grateful you are alive, and to know you and your family." Rene placed her hand on Laurent's back and waited her turn to hold Toa. Everyone was openly crying. Finally, Rene cupped both hands on the boy's face and looked him in the eyes. "Toa, my husband loved that he saved you. I know this. Hold your head up. You will always be a part of our family. Your family is now our family. My husband has bound us together." She kissed his forehead and hugged him tightly. Ketoa approached Rene, trying to speak. He attempted to convey everything he had written in the letter so long ago, but all that came out were racking sobs. Rene held him and said, I know, it is done. We move on. I have no bad feelings. I have questions, but no bad feelings." It felt as if an enormous burden had been lifted. Both families sat together in the small living room, sharing a quiet moment after talking for over an hour as they heard of Philippe's final moments. Laurent asked Ketoa, "Can you tell us the happier part of your fishing trip with our father?" Ketoa was happy to oblige. "We had been together the day before. Your father had 2 days off in a row. The first day we were together, I took him—" A small jolt went through Ketoa's body. Everyone jumped. No, it's good. I took your father diving for black pearls. They are still here in this house." It had been years since Ketoa had seen them. He was trying to remember where he'd put them. His mother had mounted the 2 smaller pearls as earrings and set the larger pearl on a gold chain. The oyster shell had been made into a veneer and pressed into a knife handle for Laurent. The jewelry and knife had been easily prepared the night before Ketoa took Philippe out again. "I wrote you a letter, Rene, but I didn't hear back from you, so I didn't send the pearls. They were too valuable." He left the room. A closet door could be heard opening, and then some banging of items. A noise of victory from him. He returned with 3 black boxes of different shapes. "These are the pearls your father dove for." He handed the first box to Sophie. Her mouth dropped open as she opened the box. 2 pinkish-gray pearl earrings sat perfectly on the velvet. "My dad touched these?" Sophie asked. "He dove 7 feet to get those. He was so happy. He said it was better than shopping at a jewelry store." It felt good for Ketoa to do this for the family. Next he handed Rene her box. She opened it to find a shimmering gold chain with a large black pearl dangling on it. Her face lit up as she looked at it. "These 3 pearls came from the same oyster," Ketoa explained. The last box was given to Laurent. He wasn't sure how he would manage to wear pearls. When he opened the box, he gaped at its contents. Inside was a beautiful knife with an inlay of mother of pearl. Ketoa explained, "The oyster shell that carried your mom and sister's pearls is the shell you see in the knife handle. Your father was thrilled with these gifts and couldn't wait for you to have them." "These are so magnificent. Thank you, Ketoa. Thank you, Hina. Thank you, children." Rene beamed at them. "My mother turned the pearls into jewelry." Ketoa began again. Rene interrupted. "Can you imagine if your mom hadn't asked the questions she did?" "Yes, we would have had a nice breakfast," Ketoa replied. and a small chuckle rippled through them. Renee then asked, Vairani, did you have any special circumstances in getting Sophie as a pen pal? Vairani thought about it. No, I got Sophie's name. Oh, wait. Everyone in my class got pen pals in Samoa, and I got a girl in France. Sophie went over, wrapping her arms around Vairani, and said, I'm so glad you got me. I'm so glad I did too, Vairani replied, smiling. Laurent stood up, crossed the room, and squeezed himself between Toa and Tiani. He patted Toa on the knee, and then took Tiani's hand. Me too. Everyone laughed, even Toa. Ketoa became serious. Renee, while I was in the boat with Philippe, he saw a couple on the beach renewing their wedding vows. He said he wanted to do that with you. Renee remembered the vivid dream she had of such a scene. He also wished his beautiful children could be there with him on the trip. It would be nice if we took a boat out and released some flowers on the water to send love to your husband and father and bid him farewell. Renee's eyes were moist. We would love that very much. Chapter 19. It was a beautiful evening as the sun lowered in the sky. The families boarded a large vessel that easily accommodated them all. Hina brought her ukulele and strummed it softly, singing several ballads with an exquisite voice. The atmosphere was reverent and filled with love. A float of flowers adorned with birds of paradise, plumeria, tiare, and hibiscus sat ready. A haku of flowers crowned Renee's head, accentuating her white off-the-shoulder dress, while a black pearl hung gracefully at her throat. Sophie wore a white A-line dress with ruffles and her pearl earrings. And Laurent looked handsome in a white linen button-up shirt and khaki pants, holding Tiani's hand. He was comforted by her presence. As their boat moved into the setting sun, Ketoa picked up speed, determined to reach a specific destination. Before committing to it, he checked the sky one last time. Clear and perfect. After almost an hour, he cut the engine and quickly restarted it, feeling relieved before cutting it again. I was just checking, he said. Renee stood at the front of the boat and asked, Ketoa, is this the spot? Ketoa nodded, yes, about. A moment of silence followed. Renee began to speak. Philippe, I know you've been with us. I know you miss us, just as we miss you. I know you rigged a pen pal program to connect two girls and two families. They all glanced at the 13-year-olds before looking at Laurent, who was holding Tiani's hand. Miracles never cease. You were my miracle. I cherished every day with you. You gave me two exceptional children. Thank you for your life, your love, and for being a hero and saving a life. Toa ducked his head. Philippe, I will love you forever and always. Consider our vows renewed. She blew him a kiss. Just then, a breeze off the ocean swirled around Renee, making her hair and flowers dance before it enveloped Laurent and Sophie, and then it was gone. Hina began to strum E Maruru Avau, a Tahitian farewell ballad. As they lowered the island of flowers into the water, it floated buoyantly, adding vibrant color to the dark ocean. Hina's voice carried hauntingly across the water, first in Tahitian and then in French. E Maruru Avau, farewell for just a while. We're parting with a smile, but dreams will keep me near you. I know we'll meet again. Farewell for just a while. Epilogue. Sunday, January 13th, 2002. Paris, France. Laurent found the noise of Paris hard to bear. Horns honked and people yelled. He felt as though he had left his heart and soul in Bora Bora. The island and Tiani seemed a lifetime away. Several months had passed since their return home. René hoped he would snap out of his blues with a return of school, but Laurent couldn't engage. Sophie fared only a little better. Both children often stared out of windows, and their teachers complained about their lack of attention to lesson material. As predicted, the pen-pal connections flourished. Laurent became more committed to their correspondence than Sophie had ever been. When a letter from Tiani arrived, Laurent would excuse himself from the family. On special occasions, they would call each other, but the expense was so high that letters remained their primary means of communication. Writing letters fostered a strong emotional bond between Laurent and Tiani. However, as time passed, the letters began to dwindle. Months turned into a year, and then 2 years. By the 3rd year, their correspondence had dropped to a trickle. By the 4th year, Tiani and Laurent had moved on, and the letters ceased completely. Laurent's visit to Bora Bora planted a seed in him, igniting a passion for the beauty of the ocean. His studies at the Sorbonne University eventually led him to marine sciences, which kept him happily connected to the underwater world he fell in love with. A half-eaten ham and cheese sandwich sat before Laurent. After finals, visiting the small city of Roscoff felt like a welcome retreat. He sipped his coffee and stretched his legs under the table. Much of the university's oceanic research was conducted here, making Laurent feel right at home. He gazed out to sea, imagining the wonders beneath the glassy surface. Dolphins playing, starfish clinging, and sea lions swimming. Near the cafe, a yucca plant burst forth with large popcorn-like flowers, while the tentacles of an aloe plant reminded him of an octopus emerging from the ground. The thought of the octopus brought memories of Tiani, laughing at him as he sat frozen staring at her. He wondered where she was now, and assumed she was still at her father's house, dancing at the restaurant and drawing admiration from other men. A twinge of jealousy surprised him. He shouldn't feel that way. He had been dating Clarisse for 4 months, but it bothered him that his feelings for Tiani were deeper than this current relationship. Strangely, those feelings grew sharper since coming to Roscoff. How could that be? Laurent's mind drifted back to the airport scene 5 years ago, where he had hoped to kiss Tiani. However, it was a family affair, and she hugged him awkwardly while casting a nervous glance at her dad. Once back in Paris, he spent a week feeling frustrated that he fouled that up. Adulthood in general turned out to be heavier than Laurent had anticipated. He found relief in the time away from Clarisse, which troubled him. What was it about her that made him glad to be apart? Eventually, his thoughts returned to Tiani. As Laurent walked the stone streets of Roscoff, he admired the ancient buildings. With each one, he thought, what would Tiani think of this architecture? It has been here for so many years. When he ordered food, he wondered, would Tiani prefer a banana crepe or a lemon? Laurent even found himself thinking about Toa, who must be 16 by now. He wondered how their parents were doing, and if Sophie still wrote to Vairani. Does being close to an old friend bring back these memories? Does fate conspire to bring 2 souls together? Could Laurent turn a corner and come face to face with Tiani? Would joy wash over him that she was a moment away from being in his arms, instead of thousands of miles away on a tiny coral reef in the middle of the ocean? Was she, at that very moment, sitting down to a crepe, wondering what had become of Laurent? Was she surprised by the flood of memories washing over her of their time together? Why was she suddenly emotional about him? Indeed, Tiani felt a pang of longing within. She missed Laurent. And now her trip to this quaint little town on the northern coast of France was overshadowed by a cloud of loss and grief. This concludes Book 1. Click the link in the bio and be taken directly to Book 2. Three Pearls is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and events are either products of the author's mind or are used in a made-up way. Any likeness to real people, living or dead, or actual events is totally by chance. Copyright 2025 Paris Paper Doll Party. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced or used in any manner without the prior written permission of the copyright owner, except for the use of brief quotations in a book review. To request permissions, contact the publisher at parispaperdallparty@gmail.com. Ebook and audiobook formats are only sold at gumroad.com. ISBN TBD. First edition, December 2025. Author, editor, cover layout, cover art of Polynesian lace, voiceover, sandwich maker, and sometimes dishwasher, Jeanette Siufanua. AI was not used to create the story content. All images came from Adobe Stock file. File numbers for Adobe Stock: Philippe 884152947, Renee 149-608-9008, Kitoa 146-294-8332, Sophie 971-089-566, Laurent 101-818-0966. Made in the USA.